just make sure this works. Yeah, that's on. Okay. Addiction recovery is beautiful because it goes right to the center of the problem, let's say, or the root of suffering. Um, and it's a beautiful thing, those meetings and whatever, the whole process, the whole thing is great because people are very sincerely interested in not suffering anymore. So like when you go there and you learn and you listen to people, they express or they share how they've not suffered, yeah? And it's quite enlivening. So I'm doing them here because it's helped me so much. But the one thing that's not talked about, I find, is the identification with the mental system as being the mental system. That's the thing I notice is not touched on. And I don't know why. Maybe it's the view or something, or because I come from like Indian philosophy and Buddhist philosophy where it meshes with this. And but this being the root of the problem, that there's something which has defeated us. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, they would call that self, like a small s self. So J is not only what has been defeated, but is the defeating factor. Self-reliance is what defeats us. So J relying on J is what has failed. Yes? And in that case, if I'm relying on something and it has failed me, or I have failed because of my reliance on it, this program essentially says that you can stop relying on it. So I can stop relying on J, let's say, and in doing so, the life gets a lot better, and then the need to use substance to get out of discomfort is not as strong. And then there's a bunch of stuff you do, of course. Faith without works is dead, as they would say. So in that case, then the work comes after that. But the idea that self-reliance has failed us is like the main standpoint of the whole thing. So being identified as something, being identified as something and living as that, let's call it a thing, small s self, the life gets driven into the wall, essentially, over and over again, and it causes a lot of mental and physical discomfort. And in so doing, I want to get out of that discomfort, so I end up drinking. Yeah, all under the spell, let's say, of being identified as small s self or J, the mental system. Yeah? Now there is no thing called a self inside of here. When my head says me, or when your head says me, it looks at this body and says this is what I am. And in that relationship between brain and body, which is not really a relationship because it's one thing, I listen to that radio station of the mental system called self, and I identify with it, yeah? So then all of a sudden, this is my body, just like the head says. The thing about self is it's conditioned, so it only sees from the past. And it sees a world right now through past eyes. And in doing so, it distorts the world with its own ideas. Those ideas make the world very uncomfortable and full of fear. So I want to get out of that discomfort, and then of course substance. So I feel, in my experience, it's the identifying with self. That's really what, that is the reliance. The reliance on the sense of individuality or self is what defeats us. So identifying as J, I live only by the view of J. And in so doing, that view is of a world that's, let's say, better than J, and it always has J below, and everything's J's fault, as the whole thing operates on self-centeredness. Self is centered on itself. So the mental system is always thinking about itself or from itself, yeah? Because it's self-centered. It's like, we take this reading in the big book here, page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. So this idea of self, or you could just say your mental system, is constantly thinking about itself or from itself. It's not because you're doing something wrong. You're not even doing self. It's just happening as a mechanism. It can't do anything else. That's its only move. Yeah? It only has one view, and that's a self-centered view. The mental system doesn't have any other views. So it only, it's kind of like this. It's almost like your head is like a water filter. So life comes in through the senses, and then the mental system claims what's coming in, yes, and then it paints it. It paints it in the color of Jay, or the color of Brandy, or the color of whatever your name is, yeah? So now, rather than events just happening, the mental system is cognizing those events, and it has its own perspective on the events, yeah? It's like when you hear if you were to hear the teachings of Buddhism, as soon as the sound of the voice comes in your ear, your head is already formulating opinions and trying to understand what's being said. But it's doing that from only its past experience. So now it's no longer hearing Buddhist teachings. Now it's just distorting Buddhist teachings, essentially. Yeah. So everything that comes in through the senses is filtered through this mental system called self, and it can only see from its own viewpoint. And that viewpoint was formulated from the past. You are not doing that viewpoint. You listen to the head when it talks, and in so doing, it now has you. Yeah? So rather than you driving, the mental system is driving. And it continues to filter everything through its own mental movement. Yeah? Now the mental movement, the view of self, is off. Yeah? It doesn't have to be way off. Mine in the past, still now, when the head goes, the view is off. Yeah? So something can happen, and then the brain filters it as this is happening to me, and now it's distorted. Now it's, if I listen to that brain, now I'm living as it's labeled what's happening, which is off. It's not actually what's happening. Now it's Jay's brand of what's happening, yeah? And that brand is full of self-centeredness. So all of Jay's opinions and views are now put on to what's happening, when none of that's really happening. This is like the identification with self, or as they would say in the book, the bondage of self. So you can think about, and this will continue to happen, by the way. You don't become enlightened or something, and then the whole thing just disappears. No. Things still come in through the senses, and the brain still colors them with whatever color your brain likes to color things in. Yeah? Because it's mechanical, you're not doing that. What you are from before it listens to it and identifies as that story. That is the bondage of self. The story is happening either way. Yeah? The filter of the mental system is going to filter everything because it's mechanical. It just does that. Yeah. Paul Hederman always says it's mechanical, which is kind of a cool way. Or like it's automatic. That's the way I think about it. It's like things come in the senses, a sound comes in, and then the brain just says bird. You don't think and work really hard. It says bird based on the past idea that that sound is a bird. Yeah. So it's doing that. Self, the mental system, is doing that with everything. With everything. And it's super self-centered, yeah? It's like if you talk to a friend, the friend is talking, and as your ears pick up the sound, what they're saying is getting filtered through you. So you're no longer really hearing what you're saying. You're only listening to your own filtering. Yeah? And then it gets colored by you, and then it come back out to them, let's say. But the point is, the brain is filtering everything, but only from its own viewpoint, because that's all it can do. You and I identify with that until we hear that we're not that, and that we don't have to identify with that. And in so doing, you no longer live as its distortion. Yeah? That makes things a lot more comfortable in this life. So, that we think is the root of our troubles, selfishness and self-centeredness. So everything comes in through the senses of the body. Everything gets filtered through that self-centered mental system. And then you identify with it because it's the only radio station. Why wouldn't you? Yeah? And then you live as what it says. You live as the filter. So if the filter says everything is terrible, then you live from the standpoint as everything's terrible if you identify with that voice in the head, which is called self in recovery. Yeah? So that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear. That's a lot of forms of fear. But fear is presented, usually it's very common if you're not from addiction recovery. Fear is it's like a big focus point of the whole thing. Fear is presented as in that story of the mental system. So fear is like an outcome of self. So in my experience, the mental filter has me as less than, and everything's my fault. That induces a lot of fear. Yeah? Meaning like, I'm never going to be good enough, everybody's better than me. And also, everybody hates you, and everything is your fault, so you can never mess up. That presents 100 forms of fear, like it would say in the book. Now, none of that is actually happening. That's all just mental movement. That when I used to identify, I would live as that fear, and then this whole life was just full of fear. And it was lived from the standpoint of fear. The fear is, in many ways, not real. It's just a mental view of what's happening. Yeah? It has no reality beyond that view. It's like if the head was not selling me that product, it would not exist. Yeah? This is why the Big Book and Recovery are beautiful, because it keeps the focus right on self, which it does in Advaita Vedanta as well. It keeps the focus right on that movement. It doesn't move from that. Yeah? So it says driven by 100 forms of fear. Though that fear can only drive you if you identify with it and live from it. Meaning if your head says this world is dangerous, you listen to it and identify as that, going, this is my thought, which the head is selling it as your thought, not a conditioned past thought, but it's selling it as real happening right now. Then it drives this body through a life which is fearful. Huh? So driven by 100 forms of fear. The head has a product, it has a view which induces a false fear of, let's say, world in this case, just for an example. If I listen to that, then this life is driven by that 100 forms of fear. So driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion is the next one it says. Self-delusion. Wow. So self-centeredness in the first place is deluded in many ways. Because when my head says me, it has me as a completely separate thing from, let's say, the book. Yeah? So, in like Buddhist or Advaitic philosophy, that is an illusion, which is deluded. So the self-centeredness has this as a completely separate thing, separate from everything else. So it's almost in a way it starts from a deluded standpoint. Yeah? And then, from the products that it's selling, like the fear example we just used, it's not seeing what's actually happening. It's filtering everything through its own ideas. Yeah? that would be delusion or illusion in many ways. Because the world doesn't have any meaning. It's only given meaning from the noggin. And then you live, if you listen or live as that, you live its life in many ways. So, driven by 100 forms of self-delusion. Self-delusion starts at the idea that I am an independent, separate thing from everything else. And then all the other ideas being based on that. So all thoughts, as they would say, Ramana Maharshi would say, all thoughts are based on the my thought. All thoughts come after the thought me or my or I. So it's already got a delusion to start with. And then its story, based on the past, seeing what's happening now, and saying this is what's happening, that all those different tiers, let's say, whatever, is deluded. It's not seeing clear. Yeah, the mental system. And it's also, you don't even have to demonize it, because it's not really doing anything wrong. It's just doing what it does. The mental system is like a learned system, yeah? I grew up, when I was young, some crazy stuff happened. My head was conditioned to see the world a certain way. And that's how it sees the world. Yeah? So I can't even blame the head, because that's what self does. Yeah? It's formulated by experience, let's say, in life, and then it sees from that formulation. So it's deluded and off. It's not seeing clear, but I can't even really beat the body and the mind up. Yeah? I can't beat myself up. That's just the way the system works. Now, the false view of self makes things extremely uncomfortable, because if I'm living as 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, that induced a lot of depression and anxiety, and I wanted out of that depression and anxiety. And where I grew up, you just drank a lot. That's what people did. And then things happened in my life, like my father died, and then the discomfort got heavier, so you just start drinking more. Yeah? Because the option that you don't have to listen or identify as self or with self, because one, there is no thing called self, but two, that's not what you are. You are of the infinite, and what we're talking about is finite. That's why we can talk about it. That wasn't presented to me, obviously. Yeah. So whatever my head said, it didn't matter how deluded it was, I was going with it, based on the idea that I was it. All right. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, and self-seeking. Self-seeking, which is like one of the pivot points of self-centeredness, yeah? Because the head can only see from its view as it wants to get what it wants when it wants it. And because alcoholics are super self-centered, it's like the whole system is turned up, then I really want what I want when I want it. And if I don't get that, I'm going to make life really bad for other people. So self is seeking. When it comes to spiritual practice, self is seeking to get out of itself. And in AA they have a great saying, which is self can't get out of self. But it is a form of self-seeking. Yeah, so J wants to get out of the discomfort of J. But J can't get out of J. Yeah? Because self can't get out of self because it's all it's got. It can't see beyond its own self-centered view. Yeah? You are not self. This is the whole point. This is the whole thing here. But you can watch your head constantly talking about wanting to get out of itself. Yeah? Like by the sentence, let's say, I'm going to get enlightened, or I'm going to get free. That I thought is not going to get free. You are before it. It is through the identification with it that has you bonded to self. but you are ever before that. Yeah. So really what you are is ever free. It's never been bound. It's been identifying with something, which is presenting bondage through that identification. And that self is always seeking. Yeah, it's always seeking for its own good based on usually overcoming other people. And that puts us in a very adverse situation between us and other people. And this is like a whole other problem. When I got sober, I had to then apologize essentially for doing that, because self-seeking goes really far. And when the system gets uncomfortable, when self gets uncomfortable, it wants out of itself. That was part of the drinking, was to get out of it, because I couldn't get out of it as it, and being identified as the mental system, I was completely bound. That got to the point where it was just the only option was to try to end this whole life. Yeah, that was the only way it would quiet down. But you are not of self in the first place. And I think it's awesome to see that spiritual practice is also can really be a hot version of self-seeking. I am going to get out of myself. You're not going to get out of that body as that head, because those things are one thing. You are ever before that. Yeah, these are finite things. So the thought, I'm going to get out of myself, I'm not. Yeah, but I'm not what's saying that. Yeah. So the self will keep seeking. Even in recovery, self will keep seeking. And it seeks in many times the same way it would seek anything else if I was in active addiction, let's say. Yeah. So I used to seek booze. Yeah. So now, even in recovery, the head will move from booze to spirituality. But the seeking is the same. And the seeker is the same seeker. It's still Jay, hi, I'm Jay, I'm an alcoholic. Hi, I'm Jay, I'm a spiritual seeker. Yeah? If we don't see that we're not self, if we're not that movement, the seeking will just find a new vessel. So the self-seeking will move right into spiritual practice. All right. Self-seeking and self-pity. Self-pity, now this is a killer. I feel personally, in my experience, self-pity is the heaviest one. The head's pitying its own situation. And that case of the poor me's, I used to have really bad depression, and man, those poor me's would put me into a dark hole. So self-pity, which is the head essentially feeling bad for itself about its own situation, most of the time that it's created, if not all of the time that it's created, a lot of the self-pity actually was based on that I'm never going to be anything, or I'm never going to be good enough. None of that had any evidence in life. That was just a mental story. So the self-pity would drive me into these really dark holes. And that would usually be like a month binge or something. That would be like a real run of drinking when I got into those. But it was all based on self pitying itself, yeah. And my sponsor would always say the poor me's. Oh, poor you, oh, poor you. And it's very dangerous self-pity. And yeah, it will drive this life into really dark holes. And it can go on for such a long time, self-pity. But it's poison for the alcoholic with depression. At least in my case, that is the one. Self-pity was the really dark one. The head talking about itself and how unfair everything is for it. Yeah. how, oh, poor me, the world's always better than me, or whatever, everything's better than me, I'll never be good enough. That story, man, it's like a glass jar, but the whole thing's painted black, and you just can't get out of it. That's, yeah. So that will drive, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So based on those, we do things to other people, and then they retaliate against us, obviously. And then it will go on to say, sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some point in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us into a position to be hurt. This is an interesting part, because there's part of this that I would actually change. But we invariably find that at some point in the past, we have made decisions based on self. Self has made decisions because it's still driving, yeah? We are listening to self. If you're listening to self, I guess that does make sense in that way. Then there are decisions made based on listening to self. So if self, let's say, is doing its pity party, and it's all about poor me's, I'm never going to be good enough. If I'm listening to that and identifying that story as my thoughts, then I'm going to act as those thoughts would tell me to act, yeah? Which would probably be I'm worthless, and then I'm going to get loaded. So we invariably find that at some point in the past, we have made decisions based on self. Yeah, that's... Which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So listening to the story of self based on fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, those thoughts are taken to be my thoughts, and in that case they are listened to and lived from, or let's say obeyed. And when they are obeyed, I'm just going to use the language here, there's a decision based on them, meaning that I'm going to do what they say. Yeah? And in so doing, I'm placing myself into a position to be hurt, which happens all kinds of different ways, obviously. Not just through drinking, but whatever you do to other people while you're drinking. Whatever. Of course, the alcoholic hurts many, many people, but that's a cool sentence. We have made decisions based on self. Yeah? If you listen to the mental system and identify with it, then the decision in a way is already made. Yeah? Those thoughts are my thoughts, that's how I see, that's right, and then I'm gone. So there's no decision to be made, really. Identifying as self, the decision is made. You are bound to self, and it will drive us into the same 3 parking spaces. I can see that in my life a lot of times, yeah? I'm sure you can see that happening. Your head talks, you listen to it as your thoughts, and it drives you to the same place over and over and over again. Wow. There is a solution. The solution is you are not self. Or anatta from Buddhism, which is even cooler, there is no individual thing called self. Self is a constant mental movement which is presenting all of these things, fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, over and over and over again, and it's highlighting them with the word my. Yeah? That word my, if you take that to be true, you are stuck to the fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And then the decision is made, essentially. You are bound, and that self will drive you in the same discomfort it always drives you. And in doing so, you're going to want to drink or drug or do whatever you do. And there is a solution. It's to lose faith in the mental system and put it into something else. Ah, it's beautiful. It doesn't even say you have to change self. It's just examining self. Yeah, to see how it has defeated us, primarily through our identification with it. Okay. Wow, nice. So if there's any questions, then please feel free to put them in the chat thing there. And we can touch on them if you like. Whoa. Bella from Sydney. Nice. Okay. All right. Nice. I'm not sure if you have a question there or... If there's any questions, please feel free to ask away. They can trigger some more stuff. Oh, great. Thankfully, these are not my teachings, though. They are from the 12 steps. It's just a little bit of a different view on the 12 steps based in the teachings of not to, let's say, or the message of not to. Yeah. It's just really what's worked best for me, is that seeing it's identifying with that mental system, so that whatever it sells, I don't really care, to be honest. Whatever the head tries to sell, the product, I just don't really care. And it's like super relieving. Yeah. I'd rather just live it one day at a time than try to figure out everything, relationships and God and the meaning of everything. It's all based on the mental, yeah. This life doesn't have meaning, it's only given meaning from the mental. And if I can see the program, let's say, showed that it's the mental's distorting everything. Right down to when my eyes see this, it says book, you know? That's a distortion in a way. Because the book is really a bunch of different little pieces put together. It's just that we know it as book, but it doesn't, aside from my mental system, this is not a book. It's just a form or color or something, yeah. And it's beautiful. This is like a beautiful distortion, but it can get super uncomfortable, man. For a lot of us, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat box there. Let's see, Nina Costello. How to keep from slipping back into believing self. I'm a parent, too soon to be for underage 6. Oh. Well, bad. Falling back into believing self. I mean, in my experience in the 12 steps, you examine it. So you see that eventually the head is just presenting it's off. So I don't know if you're in a program or not. If you're in a 12-step program or not. But if you watch the mental system, what it's saying is usually off, and it's all old. It's all based on the past. One of the things that gives this idea of small s self away is how repetitive it is. Meaning, like, it's said the same thing since I was 6 years old. My head has had me as everything is my fault since I was young. It hasn't, that line has not changed, yeah? So if that hasn't changed, and I'm now 38, I got to start questioning what's being sold to me from the mental system. You have to start losing faith in that, because it's just, if it's saying the same thing, it just doesn't even make sense, you know? And that, to me, helps me lose faith in it a lot. It's like when you get into the shower, let's say, your head, watch what it's thinking about. It's never thinking about what's happening, ever. Very rarely. And if it is thinking about what's happening, it's totally full of opinions. My opinions, yeah? But that is even very rare, because those opinions are also based on the past. But you can see that the mental's not thinking. It's thinking about what happened, and then it's projecting into the future of what's going to happen. How can we trust something that's constantly not happening, or not thinking about what's happening? If you just watch the head, it becomes quite obvious in many ways. Yeah. And then when it's thinking about past and future, it's inducing tons of quote-unquote fear, which is not proper fear, but it's like, it's a deluded fear. Self-delusion runs riot, yeah? And then if you come like from Ramana or whatever, you start to look at the me, really. And you start to see if there is a me aside from a thought based on the past. And there isn't, but you got to discover that on your own, I guess, or let's say see that on your own. So you see that it's never on, yeah? And then when it sells you the old product, which it's going to do because it's a conditioned habitual movement, you just don't have faith in that. And in my experience, you lose faith even quicker when you stop living as that mental story and things go better. And then that's like rubber to the road evidence, yeah, that maybe Jay is not God. It's like when you first go into recovery, they say this, you have to stop playing God. But to me, it's really examining what is playing God is the filter of the mental system, like we were talking about before. Life happens, it comes in through the senses, and then the brain filters it, and in so doing, it plays God. It says, this is the way this is. This is the way this person is. You're like this. This is this way, it's always going to be this way. Yeah? It says, that shouldn't have happened to you 20 years ago. This is the playing of God. Ramana Maharshi calls it a false God. So if you want to stop playing God, you stop identifying with that mental system. And in so doing, it will continue to play God for a while, but you don't listen to it. So you no longer see from its view. And then you might see something else, like actually what's happening. Huh? It's like with kids, like I see sometimes when I go on out here, people have kids around here. They're always trying to get the kid to stop doing stuff. Like people have these signs on their lawns here. It says, like they don't want the dogs to pee on their lawns, you know? Which is very funny in a way. Because they're like, this is my lawn. Yeah? And the dogs cannot pee on my lawn. So they have this belief. Yeah? But it's a dog. So without the insanity of the idea of no dog can pee on my lawn, they would just see a dog peeing and they would go, yeah, exactly, that's what dogs do. Yeah? But they're really fighting from their own playing of God that this is my lawn and I don't want dogs peeing on my lawn. It's insane, really. The beauty in the program is they just, you know you're insane because it's part of step 2. It's just, yeah, you see the thinking as insane. It's like grass is just grass, and then the mental system says mine, and now all of a sudden it's a big problem. Nothing can touch that grass. Yeah? And then there will be fights over the grass. It's crazy. So see what you hear here, see it in your own experience, yeah? Watch it. It's like with kids. Like kids are just doing kids stuff. Yeah, but from the God of the brain here, they shouldn't be doing that. Yeah? They shouldn't be doing this. Why are they throwing the spoon across the kitchen? Because they don't even think no spoon or kitchen, they're just being a kid. Yeah? It's just like this, you know? Or you can watch your head, like worry about your past, yeah, because you see the kid doing something. So you can see that the head is seeing what's happening and then immediately referring to the past, what's not happening, and they, oh, you know. See that stuff in your own experience, you start to lose faith in it, and the only place you can land is now. If you stop living as past and future, it's just right now. There's nothing left, yeah? Now, the mental system or self can only go past and future. It's dualistic, yeah? When you stop listening to it, you are nowness. You are presence, let's say. That is being our nature, the infinite presence in which past and future move through. But the mental system always wants to become nowness, which it can't do, because it's a movement of past and future. So see it. Don't see it and don't take my word for it. Look at your life. Watch your mental system and what it does. Yeah? Yours is the same as mine because we are not unique. So it operates under the same principles. I may be a pretty heavy alcoholic, yeah, and maybe you are not. But the self-centeredness, the seeing of past, and the movement of self is the same. It's the same. Yours has a different name called Nina, and this one's called Jay, but the names are irrelevant. Just watch your head do it. And you can probably see even more when kids do something, the mental system, because it's self-centered, talks about itself. It's not even looking at the kid anymore. It's just going, remember what happened to you. Or remember what this, or remember this, yeah, about you, about me. It always puts you back in the me. Pup, me, yeah. And then we want out of that me. But there is a solution. You're not that me. So put it into question rather than just go with it. Yeah. And then it's like, what's a lot more comfortable is I don't know. It's just I don't know. I don't know. The stupider I am, the happier it seems to get. And then you're there with the kids without all of the whatever, the head going off and pulling into past and future. I don't know. All right. Anyone else before we No? Okay.